Plaas Incorporated Spill Prevention. Plaas Incorporated will require the contractor to do everything practical to minimize the potential for spill during construction. Plaas Incorporated will require the contractor to comply with applicable environmental and safety laws and regulations, including compliance by its subcontractors. The contractor will be required to ensure a copy of this plan is available on site to all contractor and subcontractor personnel. Training. All contractor employees and subcontractors involved with transporting or handling fueling equipment or maintaining construction equipment will be required to complete spill training before they commence work. Plaas Incorporated will audit contractor compliance with respect to this requirement and instruct the contractor to replace any employee or subcontractor's employee found to be working prior to having spill training. Spill training will also be required for contractor and subcontractor supervisory personnel prior to commencement of work on each segment. Spill training programs will be conducted by the construction contractor and a representative of Plaas Incorporated and will provide information concerning pollution control laws, inform personnel concerning the proper operation and maintenance of fueling equipment, and inform personnel of spill prevention and response requirements. Measures, responsibilities, and provisions of this SPRP plan and identification of response team individuals, Attachment A, will be incorporated into the training. Training for other workers will be provided through ongoing weekly meetings which will discuss safety and spill prevention and response, including personnel responsibility to initiate appropriate procedures. These weekly sessions will be held by the contractor as crew tailgate meetings. Plaas Incorporated will audit the contractor compliance with this requirement and instruct the contractor to replace any foreman or subcontractor's foreman found to be holding such meetings following the receipt of one warning. Found to not be holding such meetings following the receipt of one warning. Attendance of training sessions will be documented using sign-up sheets, and this will become part of the permanent construction records. Release response equipment. The contractor will supply each construction crew with a sufficient quantity of absorbent barrier materials to adequately contain and recover spills of onboard fuel and lubricants for the piece of equipment with the largest volume of fuel plus lubricant. These materials may include drip pans, buckets, absorbent pads, containment booms, straw bales, absorbent clay, sawdust, floor drying agents, spill containment barriers, plastic sheeting, skimmer pumps, covered holding tanks, fire extinguishers, and other materials as necessary. Equipment inspection. Prior to moving any equipment onto the construction site, the contractor will visually inspect each piece of equipment for cracks, excessive corrosion, or other flaws that may compromise the integrity of its fuel, hydraulic, or cooling systems. The contractor will repair or replace leaking equipment immediately after a leak is detected and will be responsible for prompt reporting and mitigation of any fuel or lubricant spills from the equipment. The contractor's spill coordinator, Section 4.1, will make known to all personnel involved with construction, foremen, laborers, and inspectors, the contractor's yard and warehouse trailer locations of spill response equipment and materials. Spill response materials will be readily accessible during construction. Section 3, Regulated Materials Storage and Handling. 3.1, Contractor Yards. Contractors will store fuel, petroleum products, and hazardous materials at the construction yards in safe locations within secondary containment structures. Secondary containment systems normally consist of a barricade area lined with impervious material to provide a minimum containment volume equal to 150% of the volume of the largest storage vessel contained within the barricaded area. The contractor will construct these containment structures to contain spilled or leaked liquids within the structures. If earthen containment dikes are used, they will be constructed with slopes no steeper than 3:1, horizontal to vertical, to limit erosion and provide structural stability. Containment areas will not have drains. Bulk storage tanks will not be placed in areas subject to periodic flooding or erosion. Accumulated rainwater may be removed if authorized by an environmental inspector under specific situations. Specifically, if visual inspection indicates that no spillage has occurred in the containment structure, and if no sheen is present on the accumulated rainwater, the Plaas Incorporated environmental inspector may approve the accumulated water to be pumped out and released on surrounding upland areas. If spillage has occurred in the structure, accumulated wastewater will be drawn off and pumped into a storage vessel for proper disposal. The contractor will visually inspect above-ground bulk tanks frequently and whenever the tank is refilled. Drain valves on temporary storage tanks will be locked to prevent accidental or unauthorized discharge from the tank. The contractor will correct visible leaks in the tank as soon as possible. All fuel nozzles will be equipped with functional automatic shutoff valves. Prior to departure of any fuel tank truck, all outlets on the vehicle will be examined by the driver for leakage and tightened and adjusted or replaced to prevent leaking while in transit. Routine equipment maintenance of wheel-mounted vehicles such as oil changes will be accomplished at the contractor yards or staging areas to the greatest extent practical. Routine maintenance of track-mounted equipment will be conducted in a manner to gather all oil and other discharges and remove to a suitable recycling or disposal site. Storage containers will display labels that identify the contents of the container and whether the contents are hazardous. The contractor will provide and maintain copies of site of Material Data Safety Sheets, MSDS, for all materials accessible to all contractor personnel, including subcontractors. Attachment B presents typical vehicle and equipment fuels, lubricants, and hazardous materials stored or used during construction, and briefly describes the location and typical quantities and usual methods of storage. Storage methods and quantities vary with the length of pipeline, construction segments, the time of year, and the type of terrain. The contractor will provide, maintain, and make available the appropriate MSDS documents for all hazardous or controlled materials utilized on the ROW or in the contractor yards at on-site location, accessible to all contractors, subcontractor, and Plaas Incorporated employees. On the right-of-way, the contractor will undertake preventative measures to avoid environmental impacts from refueling and lubrication activities on the construction site. Refueling and lubricating of construction equipment will be restricted to upland areas of at least 100 feet away from the edge of any streams, wetlands, ditches, or other bodies of water, and 150 feet from water supply wells whenever possible. Wheeled and track construction equipment will be moved to an upland area more than 100 feet away from streams, wetlands, ditches, and other bodies of water for refueling, and at the end of each workday. Fuel and service truck drivers will be responsible for spill prevention during fueling and service activities, and drivers will be held responsible for observing and controlling fueling operations at all times to prevent overfilling. Fuels and lubricants will be stored in designated areas and in appropriate service vehicles. Storage sites for fuels, other petroleum products, chemicals, and hazardous materials, including waste, will be located in uplands. To prevent these materials and other contaminants from reaching waterways, no hazardous substances will be stored within 100 feet of streams and or within 200 feet of groundwater wells, 400 feet for public wells. The contractor will confirm with the environmental inspector the locations of areas where these activities are prohibited prior to construction crews entering the area with equipment. The contractor will maintain a minimum of 20 pounds of suitable commercial absorbent and barrier materials at each contractor yard and on fuel and service trucks to allow rapid containment and recovery of a spill. In addition, fuel trucks will be equipped with shovels and an assortment of hand tools to aid in the containment of spill. Equipment will not be washed in streams, wetlands, ditches, or other water bodies. Equipment operators will be held responsible for prompt reporting and mitigation of any fuel or lubricant spills from their equipment. Areas where chemicals may be used or stored must be maintained using good housekeeping best management practices. This includes, but is not limited to, clean and organized storage, labeling, and secondary containment where necessary. 3.3. Restricted refueling areas. Restricted refueling areas include areas where a buffer zone for refueling activities, 100 feet from a wetland or water body, 200 and 400 feet from private and public water wells, respectively, cannot be maintained. Potential situations where plans may be approved by the environmental inspector to allow refueling in restricted areas include extensive wetland crossings with limited access, continuous construction at stream, river crossings, and the required replacement and operation of stationary equipment such as dewatering pumps, generators, and boring drilling equipment. The requirement for any refueling and equipment service within restricted areas will be verified and approved by the environmental inspector prior to carrying out such activity. Tracked equipment. Only a fuel truck with a maximum of 300 gallons of fuel may enter restricted areas to refuel construction equipment. 2 trained personnel will be present during refueling to reduce the potential for spills or accidents. If the equipment operator is used as one of the 2 trained persons on the site, that person should be directly involved with the refueling process, i.e. not just sitting in the equipment, so that he or she can respond immediately to any overfilling. Stationary equipment. Equipment such as large stationary pumps may be fitted with auxiliary tanks as appropriate. Such auxiliary tanks will be placed within a secondary containment structure. Refueling of dewatering pumps, generators, and other small portable equipment will be performed using approved containers with a maximum volume of 10 gallons. Alternatively, a pickup truck mounted tank up to 300 gallons may be used to fill the secondary fuel tanks, provided the pump hose has an automatic cutoff sensor and provided the person conducting the refueling does not leave the filling location. Non-empty fuel containers will be stored in an upland area at least 100 feet from the wetlands and water bodies. Vehicle and equipment maintenance. All vehicle and equipment maintenance involving fluid replacement will be conducted outside the boundary restrictions for wetlands, water bodies, and water wells. Before lubricants are drained from the construction equipment, a suitable containment vessel and plastic sheeting will be placed under the equipment to collect any spilled material. The contractor will take necessary precautions to ensure the material that might accumulate on the liner does not spill on the ground surface. Vehicle maintenance waste, including used oils and other fluids, will be handled and managed by personnel trained in the procedures outlined in this plan. Vehicle maintenance sites will be stored and disposed of in accordance with applicable environmental regulations. Section 4, Spill Response. In the event of a spill, the release will be contained and cleaned up as soon as possible. The order of priorities after discovering a spill are to protect the safety of personnel and the public, minimize damage to the environment, and control costs associated with cleanup and remediation. The initial response to an emergency will be to protect human health and safety and then the environment. If a spill is not contained within a dike, an area of isolation shall be established around the spill. The size of the area will depend on the size of the spill and the materials involved. The contractor will take precautions in the area of a spill to eliminate possible sources of ignition. Spill Coordinator. The contractor will appoint a spill coordinator who will be responsible for the reporting of spills, coordinating contractor personnel for spill cleanup, subsequent site investigations, and associated incident reports. The spill coordinator will report to the environmental inspector and may be removed from that role by Plaas Incorporated. In the event of a spill, the spill coordinator along with the environmental inspector will be responsible for determining the extent of the isolation area. Immediate response. All spills, regardless of size, must be reported to the spill coordinator and/or to the Plaas Incorporated environmental inspector. The person observing the incident will take the following actions. Assess the safety of the situation, including the risk to the surrounding public. If safe to do so, make every effort to remove potential ignition sources and stop the source of the spill. Promptly notify the contractor's spill coordinator and/or Plaas Incorporated's environmental inspector. Report your name, the spill location, and the extent of the incident. Upon learning of the spill coordinator will implement the following measures. For an upland spill, if necessary, barricades will be constructed with available equipment to physically contain the spill. Sorbent materials will be applied to the spill area. Contaminated soils and vegetation will be excavated and temporarily placed on covered by plastic sheeting in a containment area a minimum of 100 feet away from any wetland or water body until proper disposal is arranged. If a spill is beyond the scope of the site of on-site equipment and personnel, an emergency response contractor will be secured to further contain and clean up the spill. Wetland or water body response. Regardless of size, the following applies to spills occurring near or into a stream, wetland, or other water body. For spills in standing water, floating booms, skimmer pumps, and holding tanks will be used by the contractor to recover and contain released materials on the surface of the water. For a spill threatening a water body, barricades and/or trenches will be constructed to contain the spill before it reaches the water body. Deployment of booms, sorbent materials, and skimmers may be necessary if the spill reaches the water. The spilled product will be collected and the affected area cleaned up in accordance with appropriate state and federal regulations. Contaminated soils and wetlands must be excavated and placed on and covered by plastic sheeting in approved containment areas a minimum of 100 feet away from wetlands or water bodies. Contaminated soil will be disposed of as soon as possible in accordance with appropriate state and federal regulations. Section 5, Reporting. With assistance from the environmental inspector, the spill coordinator is responsible for the completion of the spill report form. Completion of this form will assist in the assessment of the spill and provide information necessary for agency notification. The form will be completed and submitted to the Plaas Incorporated representative within 24 hours of the occurrence. The Plaas Incorporated representative will notify the appropriate agencies. Section 6, notifications. In the event of an accidental release of a reportable quantity, Plaas Incorporated or its representative will notify the appropriate federal, state, and local agencies. Section 6.1. 6.1, federal and state agencies, the National Response Center, Washington, D.C., phone 800-424-8802.